recording by daylight or streaming by moonlight. Visually impaired or not, I'm here to report on all of my favorite franchises. I hope you're ready, everyone, because it's mat time! Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Generation Millennium. I'm your host, Jeffro Madness, and it's been a while since I did a podcast episode, but we are back in Pokemon doing podcasting, and I guess it's time for a little shameless self-promotion, because I usually do this at the end of my content. But if you enjoy what I release, like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell, follow me on social medias, that will be linked down in the description below. And, well, let's get right to it. So with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet starting off Generation 9 coming out in about 8 months or so, well, I thought it'd be about time that I discuss a bunch of other topics that have been relevant up to the 8th generation. And what better way to do with one of the most common ways of shiny hunting, Pokemon breeding. Now, Pokemon breeding itself is a mechanic that started off in Generation 2, specifically in Gold and Silver in the Johto region. You just exited out the Ilex Forest, entered onto, I forget the name of the route number, but you're on the way to Goldenrod City. And near the top right section of the city, you'll just see this little house. This is the daycare center, and this is what kicks off the whole breeding function of Pokemon. But before you even get into Pokemon breeding, it's important to know a few details. For one, that Pokemon don't just also fall into different types of Pokemon themselves, but they also fall into other subcategories that are important for Pokemon breeding. These are known as egg groups. And egg groups, well, of course, they just determine which Pokemon can breed together and which cannot. For example, ghost-like Pokemon would fall into the amorphous egg group, like Dragon Ball here, or if you're playing the Gen 2 games, this would be Pokemon like the Ghastly line or the Mischievous line. And of course, you have bug-type Pokemon, usually fall into the bug egg group, although there are some exceptions, like the Flygon line. Yes, that Flygon, that Dragon Ground-type Pokemon, he's also in the bug egg group. Although he does look like a bug, like a dragonfly, so in a sense that does make sense. And then you have the Dragon egg group, which of course a lot of Dragon-type Pokemon fall into. But one Pokemon in particular that falls into this category is the Charizard line, which is rather funny because, while he may not be a Dragon-type, he did eventually get the Dragon-type he wanted when he got his Charizard X Mega Evolution Generation 6, but yeah, he's part of the Dragon A group. And then you got Fairy type A group. Well, not like Fairy typing, but the Fairy category. So like Pokemon like Indeedee here, or even something like, I believe Pikachu is also part of the Fairy A group. So previously, before the Fairy typing became an official Pokemon type, this was also like another A group that kind of took that over as one of the areas. And you got the Field A group. Now this is like the most common of all the A groups, like I said, aforementioned Pikachu and Eevee, Meowth, and a lot of Pokemon who just live on land in particular typically fall into the Field A group. But while I'm on that topic, remember when I mentioned like Pikachu being a Fairy A group? He's also part of the Field A group, and so just like Pokemon typings, some Pokemon also fall into 2 A groups in particular. So it's important to keep that in mind for something I'll be mentioning later. And of course, you have the Flying A group for flying types, or Pokemon that, I guess, that could fly, like Galarian Farfetch'd here. He's part of the Flying and Field A groups, respectively. And then Grass A group, typically for Grass-type Pokemon. You got the Human-like A group, which is Pokemon that have like a humanoid-like shape, like Mr. Mime, Electabuzz, Magmar, Machamp. I almost like Gutchamp. But Pokemon such as that. You have Mineral. This is Pokemon that typically fall into the Rock and Steel typing, who typically resemble or seem to be made out of rocks, minerals, irons and things like that such. Monster A group, like Charizard here, he is both the Dragon and Monster A group, and surprisingly the other Kanto starters are also in the Monster A group. And then you have the more confusing aspects. The most common, like the Field A group, is the Water 1 A group, which most water types fall into. Then Water 2 and Water 3. I don't quite understand how these guys get categorized. But you can find full listings of what Pokemon fall into what A groups if you look on Bulbapedia or Cerebi. They typically have them listed there. But also, some Pokemon also fall into a genderless A group. These would include Pokemon that, well, don't really... how do I explain? I guess don't have a particular shape or form to them. I mean, technically those would fall into the amorphous. But genderless are those just like Solrock, Lunatone, Phalanx here. At the moment, I just can't think of any more off the top of my head, but those are typically the gender section. But yeah, those are all the different A groups for Pokemon. But it's also important to know that when you're breeding, typically how Pokemon breeding works is that you need to have, just like real life, a male and a female Pokemon to breed together, and they also need to fall into the same A group categories. So let's say, for example, we had Scyther and Paris. These are both in the bug type A groups. But then, in order to get the egg of a species you want, in this case, let's say, for example, you wanted to get Paris from the egg. In this case, the female Pokemon would have to be the one that you want to breed down to. So if you want to get a Paris, of course, this means you have to have a female Paris or Parasect in that respective evolutionary line. It doesn't matter which evolution it's in, just as long as the Pokemon itself is female. So in this case, the Scyther or Scizor evolution will have to be male. So once you place these two into the daycare, you walk around for a while, and eventually you talk to the daycare man. He usually like steps forward outside the house to indicate that he has an egg ready for you to go. Now, how you receive eggs is actually kind of funny in a way, because there's a couple of factors that will determine whether or not you can actually receive eggs from the daycare people. Now in this case, you'll probably be thinking, well, since I caught both of these Pokemon myself, they should get along, right? Because they both belong to me. In this case, no. Apparently Game Freak wanted to encourage trading with other people, so in this case, you want to get a complete stranger's Pokemon in order to make Pokemon breeding easier. Because if you look at the Pokemon's TID, like you see on the screen here, the TID is, or trainer ID name. Just the trainer name is Melt D, and then the trainer ID TID number is most definitely not the one that's currently in my game. I'm currently using a game whose trainer name is Hermione with a completely ID number. But as long as the two Pokemon are not the same, like say for example, back to the Scizor and Parasect explanation, these two Pokemon, as long as one of them has a different trainer ID, the rate of which you can receive eggs will increase. But there's even more to it than that, because excuse me, I lost track of my notes here. Well, anyways. So say, for example, I got a female and male Litten here. You see that both of them have different trainers. One is caught by Hermione, one is caught by Generation. Since these two are different names, this will increase the rate that you receive eggs. And not only that though, like I said, they have to be part of the same egg group, so these two are the same Pokemon, so of course that will work. However, the two Pokemon, if they're the same species, different genders, different trainer names, this all affects like what the text that the old man will say. So if you're like of the best category, you'll say like these Pokemon really get along. The one below that, typically if you just have two different Pokemon, like this Scizor and Parasect example, if they come from different trainers, he'll simply say they seem to get along. In order to get the best one, they really get along, you'll need to have both the same Pokemon. So in this case, you need to have like, say, a male Parasect from Hermione and a female Parasect from Generation. Then, since they're both of the same species, then you get the text saying that they really get along, and they have to be of the same evolutionary line. I mean, same evolutionary species, so they have to be Parasect. So if you had like a male Paras but a female Parasect, since they're not the same evolutionary species, then you would just get the second from the top. They seem to get along. However, if you were to have like any of those examples I just mentioned, but you caught them yourself, then most likely you probably get something along the lines of they don't seem to like each other very much. So if, let's say, if Melody OT caught both the Pokemon, then that's likely the one you'll get, which is third from the top or second from the bottom, because just below that is the worst one you can get. So let's say you just toss two completely random Pokemon together, like say the Parasect female, but then like the male Charizard. Since the egg groups do not match whatsoever, then you're likely just going to get the final message, which says they prefer to play with other Pokemon, which immediately just tells you that those two Pokemon are not compatible. So that's something to keep an eye out for. However, don't think you can just give the daycare couple at the daycare center just any random Pokemon, just continuously just give them Pokemon and then take them back out again just to try out which combinations. No. Considering we're in the internet age, you can just look all this up online, so there's no need to waste your time doing that. But also, you'll be wasting your money in-game if you do that, because these daycare people, they're not just taking care of your Pokemon for free. Oh, no, no, no. This is a business for them. And this is actually something they take advantage of in the earlier generations, because if you leave a Pokemon with the daycare couple, every single step you take from that point on, the Pokemon that's left in the daycare center will gain 1 point of experience. So let's say you run around for like 1,000 steps, your Pokemon in the daycare just earned 1,000 experience points. So this is a pretty convenient way to get like an early game Pokemon you just caught, leave in a daycare. It'll gain levels, and once you come back to pick it up, it'll probably hopefully be at a more decent level that can join you on your playthrough. However, there's a downside to this, because for one, while the Pokemon do level up, they also will learn whatever moves or that they're supposed to learn as they level up. But the downside is you cannot control what moves are deleted as they learn their moves. Like for example, let's say you just evolves your Metapod to Butterfree, so it's at like level 10. So at that point, it should know Tackle, String Shot, Harden, and then whatever moves it learns what evolves into Butterfree, like Confusion, Gust or something or whatever. And then you just left in the daycare after that. And it'll gain like 10 levels. Once you pick it back up, it would be very likely that by that point in time, your Butterfree will have forgotten Tackle, Harden, String Shot, and whatever the fourth move was, and it'll probably be replaced by whatever moves it would learn in that sequence. So those 4 moves, but if you learn 4 moves, then those moves would be deleted in sequence. Tackle first, followed by String Shot, Harden, and then the 4th move, Confusion. So that's something to be very, very wary of. Not to mention that if a Pokemon you leave in daycare surpasses its evolution level, it will not evolve. You'll have to take it out of the daycare and evolve it yourself via either rare candies or just leveling up in the wild. And in addition, your Pokemon also will not gain any EVs or whatever they're using in Generation 1 and 2. So they'll also miss out on the EV spread that you earn from battle, so that's something to also be wary of. However, despite everything I just said, there actually are some benefits to breeding in the earlier generations. For one, you know how in Generations 1 to 4, and then BDSP remakes, that how TMs are one-time use only? Well, let's say for example, what's the best one I think of? So let's say you're back to that Scizor and Parasect example. let's say in the Johto games, you used the TM you got from Bugsy, Fury Cutter, and you taught it to your pairs that you're now breeding. Well, guess what? That TM can now be passed down to future children. Unfortunately, this does not work for like chain breeding, so I'll get to that later. But at least you can still pass down that particular TM to the next Pokemon that you're breeding for, so that way the one-time use TM is not completely wasted. And I think they keep this mechanic up to the 4th generation. I know it's kept in Generation 3, but I'm not sure about Gen 4. Haven't bred in Gen 4 in like forever, but I know for a fact it does remain for the first 2 generations because Pokemon breeding was introduced in Generation 2, Johto, and then kept in Hoenn. Not sure about Sinnoh for that matter. But as we go over those topics, just trying to find my place on my notes here. I lost my place. Give me one moment, please. Oh yeah, and then for breeding pairs, as I mentioned, usually you want to go for the male-female combo, but it's also possible to breed both those combinations as well as genderless Pokemon. Genderless Pokemon are capable of being bred, and this is where the final egg and unofficial egg group comes into play, the Ditto egg group. So you see these guys here? Yep, we got a bunch of Dittos here. And while these are different languages, that particular aspect will not actually come up into the 4th generation. But anyways, you can breed pretty much any Pokemon, male, female, genderless, with a Ditto, and you'll get whatever Pokemon of that Pokemon species that it was. So like say you bred like a male Hitmonlee with a Ditto, you can get the baby Pokemon Tyrogue, or you bred a female Bayleaf, you can get an egg with a Chikorita, and of course genderless Pokemon like the aforementioned Solrock Lunatone, Phalanx, with the Ditto, you can get those Pokemon as well. However, the only Pokemon that cannot be bred are baby Pokemon, such as, like I said, Tyrogue earlier, and then like Pichu, Cleffa, Togepi, Magby, Smoochum, Pokemon such as those. Baby Pokemon cannot be bred, period. In order to breed them, you need to evolve them to their higher evolutionary stages first, then they can be bred. Which does get a little annoying after a while, especially once you get to later generations and you start breeding down for IVs. Especially for those, some Pokemon like, say, Riolu, which usually requires high friendship in the time of day, in this case daytime, for Riolu in order to evolve. So those ones can get a tad annoying. But thankfully you can adjust your system's clock for that if you want to take that risk. But for the time being, that's pretty much, I think I covered everything I wish to mention in Generation 2. Oh yeah, so back to the mention of Ditto. There was actually, I should probably mention now that if anyone who's playing Gold, Silver, Crystal on the Virtual Console, and you wish to continue playing those on the 3DS, if you have still got them at this point, I think the eShop is already closed down, but if you already bought them a long time ago, you should know that breeding Pokemon in Generation 2 games is actually the best way to shiny hunt in those games, because there's actually a bit of a glitch. Or, I guess not so much a glitch, but how breeding worked in the Gen 2 games. So they're based off the Pokemon's IVs. So let's see, press over here, IV checker. I forget which stats exactly that they look after, but I think it was the defense stat or attack stat back in the Generation 2 games. But essentially, shiny Pokemon, if you got one, like say the shiny Gyarados you got from the Lake of Rage, they're always coded to have a specific IV number, and those numbers can be passed down through breeding. So by using those Pokemon, you can essentially just pass down the shininess through breeding. The chances are, I don't know the exact odds, but essentially, yeah, you can pass those down, and it's just a way you can just shiny hunt in Generation 2. So that's a fun little fact to know. And then we move on to the 3rd generation, and as far as I'm aware, they didn't really add anything in the 3rd generation except for one particular thing. With the addition of abilities and natures. Unfortunately, there was no way to control the natures of Pokemon at that point in time. However, abilities were something that was very much a big change, although this was only applied to Pokemon Emerald, because Emerald came after Fire and Leaf Green, so it wasn't included in those games, and definitely not Ruby and Sapphire. But Pokemon Emerald added the ability for, well, abilities, forgive me for that pun there, to have outside of battle effects. In this case, you want a Pokemon with Flame Body, Magma Armor, and then as of Generation 8, Steam Engine in your party. This will cut down the number of steps you required for eggs to hatch, because usually they require a certain number of steps in order to be hatched, depending on the Pokemon's experience group. Different groups of Pokemon gain experience at different rates. There's Erratic, which is extremely fast. Then you have Fast, Medium, Medium-Slow, and then Slow. Slow usually reserved for legendaries and whatnot, and I probably mentioned this earlier. Legendary Pokemon, of course, cannot breed, with the only exception being Manaphy in order to get Fion. That's the only exception. But essentially, in order to have those Pokemon eggs hatch faster, just make sure that you have a Pokemon with the Flame Body, Magma Armor, or Steam Engine at the front of your party, and those eggs should hatch much, much faster. And I also should have mentioned this earlier as well. Egg moves are a big factor for Pokemon breeding. So let's say, for example, we're going back to the Scyther and Parasect example. So let's say that your Scyther has the move False Swipe, and you want to pass it down to the female Paras. In this case, in generations 2 to 3, I'm not sure it applies to generation 4 as well, but the male Pokemon is the only Pokemon that can pass down the egg moves. So in this case, let's first start off with the Scyther and Parasect. Once you get the egg, you should hatch out with a Paras that knows False Swipe, and then of course if you has the Fury Cutter TM before, then that should pass down as well. From the female Paras, I'm not sure the TMs pass down that way, but they should. It's been a while since I played those games, so I can't be absolutely certain on that front, but the egg move part I am certain of. However, if you get a female Paras from that egg, unfortunately, female Pokemon cannot pass down egg moves. So even though it knows the Fury Cutter TM, that can still be passed down. False Swipe, on the other hand, will not be. If you want to pass down both simultaneously, then you'll have to hatch an egg with a male Paras for that to work. And that stays pretty much constant between generations 2 to 3. Generation 4, on the other hand, spices things up a bit, because there's an item called the Everstone that when was held by a Pokemon, it will have a 50% chance of passing down the Pokemon's, well, passing down its IVs. Did I say IVs? I'm confusing myself, sorry. Because I was thinking ahead to the next topic, but essentially if a Pokemon holds the Everstone item, in Generation 4, it has a 50% chance of passing down its nature. So let's say, for example, this Dragon Ball here, what's its nature? I can't really read it, but you guys can. Oh wait, I think that's Modest? So yeah, let's say I gave Dragapult here an Everstone. It didn't exist back in the Gen 4 games, but let's say it did, then give it Everstone. When you go through the breeding process with the daycare, 50% chance of passing down that nature. That may not seem that good, but at least you had some way of passing down natures now, which was a new addition, so it wasn't that bad. But also in Generation 4, this was also the introduction of the power items. These items are typically what you would use for Pokemon breeding. I mean, not breeding, for IV. I know, I keep confusing myself. I'm sorry, guys. The power items are what you would use to help you with EV training. So let's see, you have like the power weight that would pass down, not pass down. It help you earn more HP EVs. The power bracer is for attack EVs. I believe the belt is for defense. The lens for special attack, band, special defense, and then the anklet for speed. You have any of these Pokemon hold any of these items. When you battle against specific Pokemon in the wild, they will gain extra effort values when defeating the Pokemon. However, if any Pokemon has a high IV, or if you talk to like the judge guy, I think he's like in the battle tower areas in Gen 4 games, and he rates your Pokemon, he will mention that a Pokemon has like a outstanding stat or something along those lines. And if that ever happened to you, then you can use the power items to pass down those specific IVs. Like for example, for me, I ended up somehow getting a Feebas with a max special attack IV, So I used that to pass down that max special attack IV using the power lens to pretty much every other water type Pokemon I wanted to breed during that time period, because since IVs are randomized numbers between 0 to 31, it was pretty rare to get a max IV back in those days. Not to mention Generation 4 is also the time period of when exclusive egg moves were introduced into the franchise, starting with Heart Gold, Soul Silver. And the only example I could think of off the top of my head was for Farfetch'd. And of course, back in those days, there was just the cancel version of Farfetch'd, so it can learn the exclusive egg move, Leaf Blade, which may not seem like awesome, considering that Cancel Farfetch'd's stats weren't exactly that great back then, but at least it had a way to counter its rock-type weakness now, which was pretty special. So if you look on places like CRB, it would probably say something like down below in the egg move section, like Leaf Blade, it can learn under egg moves, and then it would say Heart Gold, Soul Silver only. And then for future games, it'll probably say something along the lines of like Black 2, White 2 only, or Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire only, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon only, or Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl only. Things of that nature, because sometimes egg moves are exclusive to some games, because for one reason or another, like say Generation 8, a lot of Pokemon's egg moves, they can be learned as TMs now. Whereas because that feature was removed and some things were mixed around in Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, that's why some moves are exclusive to egg moves in one game, but not in the other. So that's something to pay attention to if you're really going through the process of Pokemon breeding. And then Generation 5 came along, and this is where things kind of went off the rails a bit when it came to breeding. And this was the inclusion of hidden abilities. Like the Littens here, they have their hidden abilities, Intimidate. Because back then, in those days, hidden abilities in Generation 5 could only be passed down by female Pokemon. So say for example that like there was like the male Torchic event with the speed boost ability that was given out as an event back in the 5th generation. If you heard anyone back in those days who said they managed to breed for a speed boost Torchic in Generation 5, you know immediately that thing was hacked. Because again, that event, that Torchic was always made male, and unfortunately, like I said, only female Pokemon can pass down hidden abilities back then. So that was a major Gen 5 upheaval gimmick. But in addition, the Everstone was also changed, so instead of only having 50% chance of passing down natures, it was now altered to being 100%. So in that respect, not that big of a change, but still a change nonetheless. And then I also believe that's also around the time when the Destiny Knot item was also introduced into the game. This was also a big change because if a Pokemon is holding, say, an Everstone for the nature, and the other Pokemon's holding down the Destiny Knot made it so it would randomly choose 5 stats from both parent Pokemon, so 2 stats from one parent and then 3 from the other. And those stats would all be randomly chosen and passed down to the egg Pokemon. So let's say, for example, in Generation 5, you're trying to breed down IVs for... what was a good Pokemon back then? Like say the Pokemon Amoonguss, so you had 2 Fungus Pokemon. And let's see, let's say the male Fungus had a max IVs in HP and defense, and then the female Fungus you had max IVs in special attack, special defense, and speed. So then the Destiny Knot would choose 5 of those stats at random, 2 from either of the 2 parents, and then 3 from the other. So the chance of you getting that Fungus you wanted with 5 max IVs in HP, defense, special attack, special defense, and speed would be pretty low. The more IVs both parents have, the higher the odds that you'll eventually get that 5 IV combo, which is technically referred to as a perfect Pokemon for Pokemon breeding. I mean, the chances are low. I mean, it's still possible. You'll probably have to go through a ton of eggs before you get that combo. But that's essentially how breeding for the quote-unquote perfect Pokemon works. Oh yeah, that also reminds me though, back in Generation 4, this is also when the concept of the Masuda breeding method was introduced, based off of one game developer whose name was Masuda. I probably butchered his name somewhere wrong around there, I apologize. But anyways, essentially how that worked was, you see all these different Dittos that have here of different natures. I mean, not different natures, but they come from different countries. Like I believe this one here is English. They have Korean, Spanish, French, German, Italian, Japanese, simplified Chinese, and traditional Chinese. Oop. But yeah, as long as you had like one of your Pokemon, it doesn't have to be a Ditto. It could be any Pokemon in particular. So let's say you were back in Generation 4. Let's say you had like a Japanese Piplup, female. So because you want to get a, you want to go for a Piplup, so you're going to breed that one female. But then you're also playing with another Pokemon. I forget Piplup's egg group. But let's say it's water, so let's just go with a male Gyarados for now. I believe they're part of the same egg group. I could be wrong. But as long as one of them is from a different language, the chances of you getting a shiny Pokemon hatching from that egg is greatly increased. That's why the Masuda breeding process is one of the Pokemon franchise's many popular ways of shiny hunting, which is still used to this day. So there's that. And don't think I mentioned this. I mean, I did mention that when you leave Pokemon in the daycare center, they gain 1 point of experience each time they're left there. And then of course they level up. But each time a Pokemon does level up in the daycare, the price of retrieving the Pokemon will increase by 100 yen in-game, or Poké Dollars if you want to refer to that. So let's say you were doing a lot of Pokemon breeding, you left 2 Pokemon just recently hatched from eggs into the daycare center, like say the 2 Fungus example in Generation 5. And let's say you just left them there for a while and they gain like 23 levels from all the running around you've been doing for obtaining the eggs, hatching them, and just going through the process until you finally got the combination of IVs you wanted. And throughout the process, the Fungus gained 23 levels. Since your Pokemon did level up 23 times, the initial price for retrieving your Pokemon in the daycare, if you just left them there and you picked them up as soon as possible, they would just charge you 100. However, since they gain 23 levels, they tack on 100 more dollars or yen for each level. So in that case, 100 plus 2300 means that your total now goes to 2400. So breeding can get a little pricey, especially if you keep switching out Pokemon for the new ones that just hatch from eggs. So it's also a good idea to stock up on money before you do this. Although in Generation 6 this would change because of how you can abuse that in other ways. But before I mention that, it's also should be mentioned about something else that was added, because every single new generation likes to add their own little new gimmick or little system to help with Pokemon breeding. And this goes with passing down Pokeballs. Because in Generation 6 they added a feature in which only female Pokemon, and only the females, can pass down their Pokeball. So let's say here you somehow got, in Generation 6, let's say that you went to the Friend Safari and you caught an Ivysaur from the Friend Safari and you caught it in a Friend Ball. Somehow, only the female Ivysaur would be able to pass down that Pokeball though. So you have to keep hunting there until you got a female Ivysaur. You catch in whatever ball you wanted, and then only the female one can pass down the Pokeball. But another change that was made in the 6th generation was that the hidden abilities can now be passed down from both male and generous Pokemon, but only if those two were bred with Dittos. Unfortunately though, this meant that they would always come out in just standard Pokeballs when they were hatched from eggs, which was a little unfortunate, but it was just something you had to deal with. And as I mentioned before with the daycare, there's also a way you could greatly abuse the daycares in Generation 6, whether it's X and Y or Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, it didn't matter, because there's a way you can infinitely loop your game. So let's say you're just busy at work and you had things to do and but you want to get your Pokemon level to 100 or close to level 100 as you can, while you're just off just doing what you things you have to do IRL. So you can just leave the 2 Pokemon you want to level up in the daycare. They're already IV trained, IV bred, EV trained, already have the right movesets they need. They're at a high level, so they won't forget any of their moves while they're in a daycare. What you do then is simply, if you're on X and Y, you go to Lumiose City and go to the central area around like the Lumiose Tower. And you'll notice that it goes on a big circle infinitely. If you just keep your joystick moved to the left or right, your game will just move indefinitely in those directions. All you have to do is simply tie down your game's joystick using a rubber band, and your game will just move in an infinite direction, infinitely, until you just choose to stop the process. In Omega Bay Alpha Sapphire, you do this at the Battle Resort. In this case, you'll just be pressing the up button, just going an infinite square in this case, or circle, but it's essentially the same process, and you can essentially just leave your game like this in the infinite state, make sure your 3DS is also plugged in, and make sure you keep your 3DS on the whole time, do not close it. And then when you come back home at nighttime, check your 3DS, check your Pokemon, they should hopefully be close to level 100 or at level 100, depending on its experience group. Just another little thing you can take advantage of in the 6th generation. Because of this, my Pokemon X save file is probably the one game that I've gotten to 999 hours, 59 minutes, which is kind of funny to think about now. And then Generation 7 added 2 particular things to the breeding formula. The first of which is that now male and generous Pokemon can now pass down the Pokeballs they were caught in as well. Just like how in Generation 6 they made only female Pokemon can pass down the Pokeballs, in Gen 7, male and generous Pokemon were now given this privilege as well, which is why I went backwards to like all my past games to like see if I could catch whatever Pokemon I wanted from whatever regions, areas, whatever. Like say in Heart Soul Silver, I wanted to catch a Trapinch in a Safari Ball, and then pass that same Trapinch up into Generation 7. Transfer. Just so I could breed then a Trapinch, so it passed down a Safari Ball. Or say if you can catch, like say in Generation 6, say a Tyrogue in a Friend Safari, and you caught it like say in a Luxury Ball. And since Tyrogue is a Pokemon who is always male, so that means up until then you can only breed it in a Pokeball. But now in Gen 7, you can now pass down that Luxury Ball, or whatever ball you caught it in. So that was a nice addition. But the major addition from Generation 7 was the ability to pass down the Pokeballs between the different species of Pokemon. Or rather, the same species, I should rather say. So say, for example, you have this male Litten here who is caught in the Beast Ball, and this female Litten who is caught in a Dream Ball, I believe that is. So if you put these two into well, for one, I should mention Generation 7, the daycare is replaced by the Pokemon Nursery, and now Pokemon no longer gain experience points when they're left at the nurseries. Nurseries are now exclusively for Pokemon breeding, and the price for leaving a Pokemon there and picking him up is always $500 or yen, whichever you wish to call it. So unfortunately, there's no way to abuse the system to gain experience points from the now new nursery system, but all the previous breeding mechanics are still valid, so that's a plus. But like I said, you can now pass down the Pokeballs depending on the species, so let's say I was like using this Litten example. As long as they're the same species, and they have to be the exact same species, so if you use like a Litten and a Incineroar, they may be part of the same evolutionary line, but they're not the same species of Pokemon, so that would not count or work. So it had to be 2 Litten, or 2 Torracat, or 2 Incineroar. One of those two. Any of those combinations, but not a mix of their evolutionary lines. But then when you do that, there'll be a 50% chance that the Litten that hatches from the egg will have either this Dream Ball or Beast Ball. Well, I mean, in Generation 7, you couldn't use Litten because, like in that example, because you couldn't catch them in any balls back then, but just saying if you were to do so here in Generation 8, that is, then you could definitely use this combination here in Gen 8, but a better example to use in Generation 7 would be an example between different Pokemon with the same species name, but different regional forms. So let's say we were using Cancel Vulpix and a Alolan Vulpix. So let's say Alolan Vulpix was caught in a Beast Ball, and Cancel Vulpix was caught in a Level Ball. And let's say that the Cancel Vulpix was the female, and the Alolan Vulpix was the male. In this case, if you want to determine which particular species you wanted to hatch from the egg, from my understanding, the gender does not matter in this case. Like if you wanted the Vulpix to hatch from the egg to be of the region you wanted, so let's say you wanted a Cancel Vulpix to hatch, you would want the Cancel Vulpix to hold the Everstone item, and this would then guarantee that the egg you hatched would be always be Cancel Vulpixes only. Whereas vice versa, if you want Alolan Vulpixes to hatch, then in this case you would want the Alolan Vulpix to hold the Everstone. I'm not sure that's how it always works, especially now in Generation 8, but I believe that's how it works in Gen 7 at the very least. So that's something to pay attention to when it comes to regional variants, especially now that there are a lot more of them available. And then we move on to the 8th generation, which things like this, like Gigantamax factors, were brought into the game, but unfortunately, the G-Max factors cannot be passed down through breeding. And before the DLC Isle Armor was introduced, this was, I would say, a bit of a problem, but it did cause a problem when it comes to breeding. So let's say I had this non-G-Max Corviknight here, who has the egg move Roost. That's nice and all. But then let's say you had the shiny Corviknight here, who is G-Max that you managed to catch. However, it does not have an egg move on it. And since G-Max factors cannot be passed down, you'll be wondering like, well then, how do I get the egg moves onto this Corviknight? This is where the blessing of the Generation 8 feature gets introduced into play. So similar to the whole passing down Pokeballs of Pokemon with the same species and all that stuff worked in Generation 7, the same thing applies here. So in this case, you would need to have 2 Corviknights or 2 Corvisquires, 2 Rookies. Just as long as they're part of the same evolutionary line, it'll work. So in this case here, we have 2 Corviknights, 1 normal, 1 G-Max. And you want the G-Max Corviknight to gain the egg move Roost. First off, you would make sure it has an open move slot, so make sure you go to any Pokemon Center and use the move deleter to delete a move. And then all you do is place both of these Corviknights into the nursery. And then once you do, run around for a bit, about as long as it would take to acquire an egg move. Or not acquire an egg move, but rather just for an egg to spawn up. And then once you go back to the nursery and you talk to them, pick up both your Corviknights from the nursery, then this G-Max Corviknight here should have the move Roost on it. But on the top of egg moves themselves, they can be a bit of a challenge. So let's say, for example, Chansey here, you want this Chansey to earn the egg move Seismic Toss, which is typically a move a lot of competitive Chansey use online. The problem is how to get that egg move on it, because Chansey is just part of the Fairy Egg group, I believe. And unfortunately, if you were to go look on places like Cerebi, no other Pokemon in the Fairy Egg group knows to move Seismic Toss. This is where the feature of chain breeding comes into play. And this is not only exclusive for just passing down IVs or natures for that matter, but this is mainly used for egg moves exclusively, and this is something that applies to every generation of Pokemon, not just Gen 8. This goes back all the way down to Generation 2 as well, at the very beginning. So then you would have to do a bit of research and go backwards. So say for Chansey here, part of the Fairy Egg group, you would have to look for Pokemon from other egg groups that can also learn the move Seismic Toss. In this case, we move down to the Pokemon Mawile, who's part of the Fairy and Field Egg group, who can also learn Seismic Toss through breeding. So in this case, you need to look at a Pokemon then in the Field Egg group, who can also learn the move Seismic Toss, which we then move to the Pokemon Parangoro, who is part of the Field Egg group, but also part of the Human-like Egg group, who also can learn Seismic Toss through breeding. So now then you have to look at a Pokemon in the human-like egg group who can learn to move Segmentos either through breeding or level up. And this was where we have the Pokemon Machamp, who's part of the human-like egg group and can learn to move Segmentos through level up. Perfect. So then you just go through the process, have a male Machamp with female Pangoro, pass down the egg move, make sure you have you hatch a male Pancham. And once you have the male Pancham with Segmentos egg move, you didn't have to make sure you have a female Mawile. Breed those two together, make sure you hatch out a male Mawile. And then since Chansey is always female, you breed those two together, and then once you hatch the Chansey from the egg, it'll always be female. And then by then you should have the move Segmentos. It's a long process that you have to do quite a bit of research into, but hey, this is called chain breeding, and that's how you can pass down egg moves between different egg groups. Something very important to note there. And along with all those different methods, as I just talked about earlier, so passing down the egg moves, passing down the IVs, using things like the Destiny, passing down natures, with using the Everstone, and then also you can also pass down the hidden abilities as well. Those are always the hardest to keep control of because while female Pokemon have a higher chance of passing down their hidden abilities, it's not always guaranteed. You might still just get the standard ability. But if you're breeding Generation 8 games, then that's no longer a big deal because you can just change abilities using either the ability capsule, or if you hatch a Pokemon from an egg that has a standard ability but you want the hidden ability instead, you can just adjust that with the ability patch, which was added in the Crown Tundra DLC and is also available in Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. So that's also something to keep an eye out for, and just going through all the different processes, you can essentially breed the perfect Pokemon that you're looking for competitive battling. If you're wondering why you would go through all that trouble to breed a Pokemon with all those IVs and whatnot, when you have things like bottle caps, keep in mind that bottle caps themselves are pretty expensive items that are exclusive to post-game stuff that require you to go through quite a few hoops to go through. So that's why people still breed, because for one, it's cheaper, and two, it's easier to control and whatnot. But also, you also need the IV Judge function, which, funny enough, a lot of people I've heard who play Pokemon games like Pokemon Sword and Shield, they only played up to the part where they got the first gym badge from Turtfield, and because after that, they have access to the nursery on Route 5. Which at that point, they just stopped playing the Pokemon game. They obtain all their Pokemon from like other sources and whatnot, and they just breed them. And then they use their Pokemon Home Premium services to check the IVs that way, so they don't have to get to the post game to get the IV Judge function. And that way, they can just save their bottle caps for pretty much all the legendary Pokemon they catch in the post game, because since you can't breed legendaries, typically that's what you save the bottle caps for. In which, in this game, if you wanted to use your bottle caps on other Pokemon, then you would just save them for Pokemon you probably obtain from like max raid battles or something. And I think that's all I have to mention about Pokemon breeding. It's a pretty long and arduous topic, but it's still a majorly popular one that's used in Pokemon to this day. And even though Legends Arceus didn't have breeding, neither did the Let's Go games, it'll likely be one that you'll be using in the 8th generation. And if I missed anything from this list, because I somehow lost the notes sheet I was using earlier, I don't know where it disappeared to on my notes here. I'm looking at my iPad to the side, but apparently the little bullet point spreadsheet I was using just up and vanished on me. Oh wait, no, I found it. But I believe I talked about everything I want to talk about Pokemon breeding. Oh yes, one last note. Pokemon breeding is also the last way you can breed baby Pokemon. Like say for example, you took Pikachu, you bred it, you always get Pichu from the egg, or if you bred like Clefairy, you always get Cleffa. Togetic and Togekiss always breed Togepi. However, there are some Pokemon that can only be obtained through breeding through special items known as incenses. So let's say you were to breed Chansey or Blissey while one of them was holding the Luck incense. You would always hatch a Pokemon happening this way. Or say you want to hatch, you gave Meryl or Zimmerl the, I believe the Sea incense. This is how you would get Azurill. If you bred Mantine holding the Wave incense, you would get Mantike. Breed Mr. Mime while it's holding the Odd incense, you would get Mime Jr., and so on. The incense items can usually all be bought in one location. Just make sure the Pokemon that you want is holding the incense, and that's how you get the baby Pokemon. So for those who are just trying to complete the Pokedex, that's just another way you can obtain them. And let's see. I talked about baby Pokemon, Basuda breeding, IVs, passing. Yep, it looks like everything I had listed down. Okay, guess I didn't have as much as I thought I did. Well, if you all liked what I talked about, or if you think I missed anything, feel free to fillet me down in the comments below. And if you liked what I did, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, follow button, social medias, all that stuff I mentioned earlier. And I guess I'll just catch you all next time. Until then, stay safe because of this whole world academic crisis. And, well, I still need to work on my outro. Yeah, I'm tongue-tied and I really need to get some drink of water because remember, staying hydrated is good for you. Take care!